I'm Belle Bellingham. I'm a creative director, a design journalist, a design history lecturer, and I say all of those things just so you know who I am and why I'm standing here. I am going to be taking you through some color trends for 2023 moving into 2024. But I say, and well, before we look at the color trends, I'm going to look at some macro trends and then at some interior design trends and architectural trends, and then how they're translating in the color trends. But I have to say from the beginning that I find the whole business of trends a little bit poncy, maybe sometimes frivolous, contradictory. And I think that the problem is that when trends are not presented in the grander scheme of things, in the matrix, the social, economic, political context in which they're playing out, then they become irrelevant in some ways. So in order for us to use trends, which are basically patterns, they're insights, in order for us to be able to use them conscientiously and constructively in our own practices or our own businesses in our day-to-day, we have to make them relevant. We have to take bits of them that are pertinent to our own worlds. So I think herein lies the crux. In this chaotic world at the moment, trends are signals in the noise, and we follow trends in order to make better decisions. So that's kind of where I'm going to be going through. So if you think about where we are at the moment and just all the buzzwords that we're having to stay on top of, from digital first identities, psychedelic fonts, candy colors, holographic design, it keeps on coming, and every week there's something new that we have to stay on top of. So if you take a step back and you understand the macro things that are causing all of these trends to float to the surface, then you're better able to understand human behavior and consumption, because basically that's a lot of what design is. It's consumption. It's what we wear, how we dress our homes. In terms of just 2023, the global macro trends that we're looking at the moment, or you could actually refer to them as global threats, we have energy scarcity, rising inflation, rising living costs, all of which are serving to undermine homeowners' sense of stability and surety. So those are then manifesting in our material culture, in our homes, and in our color trends. We're in the middle of one of the most disruptive periods in modern history, and in this chaos, we are looking for signals in the noise. There are these global forces at play, which are actually global mega threats in many ways. So climate crisis or polycrises, rising inflation, rising living costs, and all of these things are working together to undermine homeowners' sense of security and safety. All of which, this instability, this kind of chaos is starting to manifest in our material culture, in our homes, in what we wear, and in the colors that we choose. We're also stepping into an age of living intentionally. Consumer decisions are being made with more purpose. So what that means for you and me and our businesses is that we have to really show that our commitment to people and planet is solid. It's not about lip service or doing just enough. We need to leave this world better than we entered it, and environments that we enter into. So brands need to be clear about their commitment to people and to planet. And if I were to, I think, summarize a lot of the trends at the moment, they walk this fine line between frivolity and creative expression and this need for escapism, but at the very same time, there's this need for reassurance and nostalgia. So you're starting to see some nostalgic, almost retro design references coming through. All of these kind of things, especially the sense of instability, and also this balancing act between instability and optimism, because I should also say with great relief that we're starting to move out of this kind of crisis fatigue, and especially in aesthetics, but also just as a people, as a social trend, we're starting to see a lot more abundance and optimism, which I'm going to take you through in terms of the colors. So definitely this dominating theme is uneasiness, at the same time abundance and optimism, and that kind of tension between the two is really what we're looking at in terms of colors. I think in terms of just the design community and some of the trends that we're picking up, it's with great relief that I should first say that we all know that designers are quite a dangerous breed of people. We have been very complicit in generating a lot of the waste and the bad patterns of behavior and artificial desire and need that have contributed to this biodiversity crisis that we're sitting in. But we're also very well placed to be the people who can drive change. So a lot of the challenges that we're seeing at the moment can be opportunities. So as the design community, we're really starting to understand our collective impact and also our accountability, which is very, very important. How do we design for more people? How do we make design relevant for a lot more people without decimating the planet? How do we potentially design new behaviors instead of new products all the time? And very importantly, how do we use design to unlock good business? which I think is completely an untapped resource, specifically in the Southern African and African continent. So those are kind of the trends that we're looking at from a design community. If we look at tech, because tech obviously it is advancing at breakneck speed, and there are a few things that are working in conjunction that are driving the fourth industrial revolution, from AI to robotics to the industrial Internet of Things. I think if I just touch on firstly on virtual and augmented reality, how it's completely revolutionizing the way we experience products, services, and designs. And not only does that mean that designers are having to design differently, but people are experiencing our designs in different ways. It's also unlocked immeasurable possibilities for designers to create these otherworldly worlds. In terms of the metaverse itself, we have an opportunity to completely redesign everything from the ground up. I mean, if you think about it, the rules of physics don't apply in the metaverse. So we really are able to change how we shop, how we build or design. So from a kind of game-changing disruptor in terms of the design community, I actually still fully don't understand what the full incarnation of the metaverse is going to be, because it keeps on changing and the possibilities keep on changing. But what is crystal clear is that you and I and our businesses have to have a virtual duplicate very, very soon. It's not that it's coming or when it's coming, it's here now, and we will all have to understand and also take ownership and agency in how we'd like to show up in the metaverse. Also, AI just blowing people's minds in terms of what we're able to do in terms of self-expression. It's also creating a whole new aesthetic. Also, the fascinating thing with AI is that it's able to take massive amounts of data and then optimize designs based on that. And that's what, again, consumers are starting to expect that. We expect everything to be personalized, to be optimized based on our needs. So all of these kind of things that are happening in tech are also then affecting our in real world design practices. I think also another fascinating thing is the way that blockchain is, the way it's opening up the design world by decentralizing access to knowledge and skills. So you call it the Internet of Skills. And specifically in the design industry, this is creating new ways to collaborate. It's also just opening up information to more people, which means that more people can be involved in this design industry. So by diverse input, we're also going to get a much richer output, which is very, very exciting. But I think, yeah, I mean, these are some of the images that you're seeing now on your screen now from Midjourney, and just, again, really indicating that these are tools. They're not terrifying. If you think of ChatGPT, everyone's terrified that it's going to take over our jobs. But just like any period in history where we had the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, the tools that we had and the advancements in technology were amplified our human abilities. It did not replace us. So I think if we can look at it that way, we can really augment what we're able to do as a design community. Right, sustainability, also massive buzzword, and I'm really trying to find ways to make this sound more sexy, because people are already starting to get sustainability fatigue, and we cannot afford to be. Specifically within design, good design is able to create the conditions where we are able to give back more than we take. As I mentioned earlier on, we are accountable for a lot of damage and a lot of waste that we've created in the past. But in terms of sustainability, we're really well placed to drive this desperate need to regenerate the planet. It's also, I mean, a lot of us, our lifestyles have become more sustainable, our business practices have become more sustainable, but it's not enough. We've got to work together in order to accelerate what we're able to achieve in terms of repairing our planet. I think that it's maybe in the wake of the pandemic, but also just there's a global consensus that our systems are failing us. They no longer serve us. There's widening inequality, which is driving social unrest, all of these things. And I think another buzzword to throw at you is intersectional environmentalism. So as much as we need to be looking after our planet and repairing our planet, you cannot do it divorced from social justice. So this idea of intersectional environmentalism is also very important at the moment, and people are really investigating how it works and why it works. In terms of the design community, it's also fascinating in that we're really starting to look at waste as a material. We're starting to look at new sustainable and environmentally friendly materials in our practices, which means that we're starting to see a new aesthetic based on this. So everything doesn't look like wheat picks anymore in terms of when it's sustainable. We're really getting a very exciting, and again, I have to say the word, it's sexy. It's a sexy aesthetic that's coming out of it. And again, you and I as designers and specifiers we have a lot of power in deciding what materials and processes are chosen in our practices. So I think that the key thing here is that blind consumption is being replaced by conscious consumption. And we cannot ignore that. And especially from a business point of view, we have to serve our consumers' desire for this. Then in terms of interior trends, so I think that there's another fatigue in terms of the Pinterestification of aesthetics, that everything kind of is taste by algorithm and you kind of just see the same things over and over again. But at the same time, we are starting to move away from that. It's almost like a revulsion against it. So a movement towards more self-expression, not quite as tasteful all the time, and really actually expressing our personalities in our homes. Another trend that we're seeing develop more and more is this idea of organic, curvilinear, round shapes in our interiors. And there's a reason for that. Science is proven that that these organic, chubby, like curvilinear shapes give us a sense of security, which is something, again, which I've mentioned in the beginning, and I'll probably say another 5 times as we go through these trends, in that there's this overwhelming sense of anxiety at the moment in consumers and instability. So we gravitate towards shapes and colors that give us some reassurance, which is definitely we're seeing in this curvilinear trend. I think also, as an antidote to this anxiety, we're starting to develop healthy coping mechanisms. And I would say that joy and abundance and optimism is one of those actual coping mechanisms, which also just lends itself to these kind of chubby, warm, voluminous shapes. So another reason that we're seeing a lot of them come to the fore. Similarly to that, I think the 3 words, this idea of care, community, and connection, are 3 driving forces in terms of aesthetics, which seems a bit strange, but it's actually not. If you think about the war in Ukraine, post-pandemic, the refugee crisis, all of these things that are undermining our security in this world, we realize that as humans, as a social population, we need to care for each other, we need to create connection, and we need community. And a lot of those kind of those sentiments are then playing out in our homes or in our aesthetics. We're also, consumers are really gravitating towards mood-boosting colors in their homes, and also tactile materials, nostalgic art. I mentioned it earlier on that this move away from always being completely tasteful, which is really a relief in people's homes. We are realizing how our physical spaces can affect our emotional and psychological well-being. So we're using our spaces, and specifically the colors in our spaces, to improve that. Right, moving on to a few architectural trends. 3D printing I'm not even really going to go through. I think it had its heyday a little while ago. It's really starting to get very exciting again. But 3D printing in architecture is blowing people's minds. Specifically in South Africa and on the African continent, the opportunities are immense. There are a couple of reasons. Firstly, where any kind of precision is required, 3D printed architecture is really proving to be the perfect tool and resource, but also just taking away a lot of the labor-intensive aspects of construction, the wasteful aspects of construction. That's all removed with 3D printing in architecture. So from a sustainability point of view, it's ticking all the boxes. From an economic and commercial viability point of view, it's really proving to be a game changer. It's also creating quite a beautiful and new aesthetic in that it's able to create these new curves, new textures. We're also able to design a building once and then copy-paste it 1,000,000 times across the world. So again, from a scalable aspect, very fascinating. So I think specifically, and just if you think about our housing crisis in South Africa and on the African continent, can you imagine what we can do with such an economic and sustainable printing solution for architecture? Biophilic design is also it's on the tip of everyone's tongue at the moment. It's obviously nothing new, but I think, when we refer to biophilic design, it's a very meaningful relationship between design and nature. It's about working with nature and not dominating nature. So very much bringing nature indoors, using nature, but working with nature, I think, is the key thing. So in terms of the home, obviously that's bringing green aspects into the home, but also building with nature, understanding that she is the main muse. She was the first great designer, and using her principles in terms of how we're doing things. In terms of biophilic urbanism, also fascinating by greening our cities, by having more parks, more green walls, more balconies. Not only are we increasing the quality of our air in the cities, but also reducing the temperature, which is very, very important. But in terms of just not only these principles, but the aesthetic that is coming from this is quite fascinating, and very exciting, and I think in terms of what we can do with it. Vernacular solutions. So also not brand new, but definitely having its moment, and I think will do for a long time. So vernacular solutions, specifically in design, refer to strategies that are based on the local traditions, customs, and communities in a regional context or within a specific community. So, for example, it means design solutions that are using locally available materials. For example, if there is thatch or bamboo or brick in an area, it's using that as opposed to bringing something from far away, which creates quite a beautiful aesthetic. They also make very, very clever use of passive solar design. So it's about orientating buildings well, designing natural ventilation systems, all of which creates natural cooling for buildings without having to put a massive aircon on the wall and draw from energy sources. Also very beautiful are the regional patterns and colors that come into vernacular design solutions. So whether that is the patterns for textiles in the area, or using the mud in the area, which creates these very beautiful like earth tones in buildings, it's paying homage to what is in the context of where the build is supposed to be or is happening. So I think really what is making vernacular architecture have its moment is the fact that it incorporates cultural identity into the design solution. Sustainability and functionality are key in the design, which I think with functionality sometimes that gets on the back foot in favor of aesthetics, but not with vernacular architecture. Right, so how did all of that play out in our color palette for 2023 moving into 2024? I'm going to say it again, it's this overwhelming sense of instability that is driving a lot of the colors and our reaction to that. But then you also add in creativity, technology, which I've mentioned, our well-being. Obviously well-being or wellness is one of the biggest trends at the moment that I can't even go into today, but it's driving the way we make our decisions. So all of those together, we're starting to see reflect in our color choices. So I think that, I mean, I'm obviously madly in love with color and its power and what it can do. But I think what is fascinating about color is that it reflects the social, political, and economic climate, which is fascinating. Right, what does that mean? So we're seeing a lot more warming neutrals. So we know that consumers are gravitating towards things that are grounding, that are reassuring, that seem timeless. Even with that, in terms of the sustainability aspect, we're not desperately looking for new all the time and to update and to change. We're realizing that actually we can do it slightly less and have it for longer and preserve what we do in our design. Also, these warming neutrals are very connected to nature, which we know serves us well, serves our well-being, and also work well with all of the other colors in the palette that we'll move through. But I think the key amongst this is that it's this idea of reassurance and gentleness, and we know that it can work really hard in the home to pacify and to nurture. In terms of the grey for this year, there's always a grey, but the particular shade of grey at the moment is quite a utilitarian, practical, gentle grey. It's just enough, and also, again, speaks to this idea of sustainability. So just, I think it's also gender inclusive and not shouty, which I think is quite important to say about this grey of this year. It's just enough. Just to pick up on some of those kind of bigger sentiments, with Plascon's summer palette for this year, it's called Homegrown. So you'll see here, it's these gentle, warm neutrals with accents of warm yellow and nourishing greens, all of which take inspiration from our South African landscape, which we know to be familiar and nurturing. So again, you see this balancing act at all times of how to create an antidote to the instability that we're feeling, and then we gravitate towards what is familiar and reassuring. There is always a green in every trend forecast, but I think the particular shades of green that we have this year are really interesting. They are nourishing greens. They are nurturing greens. They also very fascinatingly straddle very carefully the worlds of digital and physical. So a lot of the colors actually that we're seeing at the moment really live well at the beginning, at the middle, the bridge between our virtual worlds and our real worlds. And in terms of this particular green as well, it's also fascinating how it really connects nature and technology. We really are paying attention to nature as a source, as a as again I've said earlier on, something to work with. But that also means that there's a relationship between nature and technology that we're starting to look at, which comes to the fore in this kind of gentle matcha green. In our homes, we're also seeing this a return, well, a resurgence of quite a limey green with a bit of acid in it. Again, this feeling of having a bit more self-expression in our homes is coming to the fore, but a beautiful, beautiful shade to use in the home. But very much pacifying, connected to nature, reassuring, and gentle. And then on the complete opposite, and like how I said right at the beginning, when sometimes trends can be completely contradictory, we're also seeing the rise of a cyber lime, which is this electric dopamine, kind of very digital, gender inclusive, vitamin kind of color, if I could put it that way. And really, there are a few colors like this that pop in the palette for this year that you can see we're needing a bit of energy, we're needing a bit of vip. And again, this idea of vitamin for our health and using color to invigorate us. Again, this idea of how colors are moving from the metaverse into the real world, back into the metaverse is fascinating. And it's kind of also creating this kind of syncretic realism in that the colors are very sensorial, surrealistic, and have to work quite hard in both spaces. There's also, at the same time, we're seeing a lot of very crisp colors, and that also comes from how much of our lives are spent online. So we're starting to become, a lot of our experiences are mitigated or defined by our online experience. So quite crisp colors. But lots of these as we move from the warming neutrals into these very sun-drenched, sun-kissed, gentle yellows, warm yellows, safari kind of colors, especially in the kitchen, in the home, we're starting to introduce a bit more warm yellow, and then again with pops of lime and pops of orange, which I did not see coming this year, but is a big color for 2023, moving into 24, which I'll chat about in a little while. Right, next big, very important color group to chat about is soothing pastels. And this, again, comes from these ideas of care, community, connection, reassurance. Pastels have a shorter wavelength, so scientifically they have a reassuring and nurturing quality. And they also they work really well with the warming neutrals. We're also starting to see that how do things work together? How do we do more with less? But the pastels we're seeing, I mean, this trend started last year and it just keeps on growing. The shades keep on morphing, getting a bit more dirty, a bit more pale, or a bit more acidic when they move into the metaverse. But this idea of, the word is digital lavender, which obviously was brought to the fore firstly by the Gen Zs, but it's not going anywhere. It's in fashion, it's in cars, and it's in our homes. In our homes, obviously, it's slightly more muted, slightly more broken. For example, the Berry Light and the Plascon palette. But a classic example of a color that was kind of born online and has moved into our physical worlds and is now operating just as strongly in both. Pink. So pink obviously is, not obviously, but I would say that the reason that there's such a particular shade of pink at the moment is that it works really well in the metaverse. It's got a pop. But again, it speaks to our consumers' desire for delight as this antidote to anxiety. So it's kind of like candy, very happy pink that we're seeing in the metaverse. And then when it comes to our homes, it's starting to get a bit more blush, slightly more salmon. But again, understanding that the colors that we put in our homes can have a very powerful effect on us. And pink is one of those colors. Then we move into the grounded earth tones. These are very nature-led tones. Think baked brick, desert, iron, ore, rust. And in terms of the home, very much showing up in these terracotta shades. It's almost like a deeper orange. And there are lots of reasons for this. I think one of the key things, and also how we're seeing it play out in the home, is this idea of self-expression. So you're starting to see these quite saturated statement walls again in these baked, deep, warm colors. And all of it, again, it speaks to this idea of warmth, reassurance, also timelessness, authenticity, traditional craftsmanship, which we know will last for a long time. So gently you start to get a sense of these ideas of sustainability, tech, all of how these macro trends are playing out in our colors. Orange I mentioned earlier on, and it really is, it's having a huge moment in terms of fashion trends, beauty trends, interiors, and there's a reason for it. Again, it's a dopamine color. It's got a very strong relationship with wellness and with nature. If you just think of an orange. So people are using that, they're using the power of this color to have a positive impact on their lives. So I think Rust is having a huge moment in terms of specifically our home, so if I can focus on that. And it just ticks all these boxes in terms of this timelessness. It's kind of authentic luxury or gentle luxury. It's also reminiscent of soil, warmth, natural goodness, and also just being very, very used in pioneering ways in the home. And it's across the spectrum from caramel to coffee, chocolate. We're seeing all shades of rust to dark to brown being used. I think it's also got this long-term appeal, which is why we're seeing so much of it. It's and I would also say quiet luxury we're starting to feel in these colors. It's also fascinating in that the last time that this spectrum of browns had its heyday was in the 70s, which is a similar period of upheaval. So you can get this understanding that we gravitate to these nostalgic, almost retro colors because they're familiar, because we can hold on to them. We know what they mean. So in times of chaos, that's often what people do. They gravitate to what is familiar to them. But again, it's a good neutral. It's being paired well with these warmer neutrals, this darker, rich, comforting shades of brown and caramel and rust. Then red. Red, every big color house has a red this year. And again, it speaks to this, I think, this precipice that we're on in terms of we know that if we don't make cardinal changes in our world and our systems, we're going to go boom. So it's almost like the sense of anticipation and knowing that things are about to change radically and that we need energy, we need vip, we need to be able to face what's coming. So that's a lot of, in terms of the reporting about red and why everyone's gravitating towards it is why. It's the sense of urgency and at the same time care, community, and connection. It's also an incredible color in that it's trans-seasonal, it's gender inclusive, it works really hard, it's obviously a very emotional color, so you can use it quite powerfully and in clever ways in the home. You can't really do a color trend report without mentioning the Pantone color of the year for 2023, which is Viva Magenta. In the Plascon palette, the closest one is Fuchsia Fizz. So it's this kind of purplish red, and again, speaks to everything I've just mentioned in terms of the power of red and why people are gravitating towards it at the moment. It's got energy, it's got vim, it's got vip, it's got vigor, which is, so again, you can use it cleverly in your interior scapes or in all manner of design manifestations. The blues from this year palette are very much inspired by both the metaverse and our digital worlds. Also, we all realize that we're trying to seek more balance and wellness in our lives. So to slow things down, to create more sensorial moments, but also very much inspired by particularly nature-colored blues. So, for example, rivers, the sky. Plascon have a beautiful color called River God, which I've been using quite a lot. So also blue, always a timeless color, appeals to all ages, but really fascinating at the moment how it's straddling both the real and virtual worlds. So, to summarize that, we're having these beautiful warm neutrals, these earthy tones that are really, really coming to the fore, combined with pops of bright red, bright orange, accents of pink, and then obviously these soothing pastels, which everyone is really seeing how powerful they can be, specifically in interiors. The way forward is still not clear. We still are in this prolonged period of recalibration, but what is clear is that our challenges can be our opportunities, and we as a design community are really well placed to drive that change. So, like I've mentioned a few times, we as specifiers get to make very powerful decisions on behalf of consumers, and we have to take responsibility for that and think deeply about the decisions that we make. I think, yeah, uncertainty is not going anywhere. But the way forward is far more clear, and it is optimistic, and it is abundant. And we'll start seeing that more and more in our colors and our aesthetics. So, after all of that, you'll see that our colors reflect the social, economic, political climate that we are in, and that they're a fascinating tool that we can use in our spaces. Please feel free to get in contact with me, Belle Bellingham, if you would like to, and specifically Plascon. They have a wealth of resources if you're ever needing advice on colors, color matching, all manner of tools and resources available. Thanks so much.